these people, knowing that God's love was for them. It's a hard one. What do you think about this verse? This is one that's often misunderstood, I think. Well, Paul talks a lot about the flesh and the spirit here. The flesh, the Greek word is sarx, kind of meaning body. He's not separating the body and the spirit. Greeks did. And so their understanding was that the spirit was good, the body was bad, the body would be destroyed, the spirit goes somewhere else. If that thinking that's very common amongst Christians, that the body goes into the earth and the soul goes into heaven, it's not really biblical. Sorry. I'm not going to tell you you're wrong, I'm just saying it's not biblical. Okay? In Hebrew thought, body and spirit are one. And I don't know exactly how to make of all that. And some of you have had experiences probably in which you've experienced at death the spirit kind of leaving, or feeling that, or feeling spirits of someone who's died in a room with you, or those kinds of things. I don't necessarily think that that goes against what Paul's saying here. I don't know what to do with that, honestly. All I know is that we believe in a resurrection of the body, and therefore the body is not evil. And that when Jesus rose from the dead, he wasn't just a spirit, but he had a physical presence. He was able to walk on the road with the people, eat the food they offered. But it was different because he also went through walls. So he was recognizable. Show me your hands, Thomas. So we see this. So those are things that I'm waiting to be enlightened on. But yeah, anyway, it's not that the body's bad. You can do whatever you want with the body as well as your mind or your spirit is good. And there was thinking in New Testament times with this freedom that therefore my body, I can do what I want with it because God only cares about my soul. Not in the New Testament. Not biblical. And Paul addresses that. One sentence I'm looking for, verse 28. This whole chapter is good. There's so much in here in terms of suffering, pain, and the glory to come. That's referring obviously to heaven when we're with God. But verse 28, we know that all things work together for good for those who love God or are called according to his purpose. How do you understand that verse? Shirley?
That, and I may be way wrong, but that life happens, garbage happens. We get sick, depression, death, all those things happen. And that if you can release those things to God, the pain of that, the suffering of that, and accept God's company and God's walking with you through that, at some future point in your life, then God takes that tragedy, that pain, whatever, and then uses you to work that for good as a witness for others or helping others who now are in a similar, maybe not same, but similar kind of situation. So it's letting go of that pain, surrendering it to God, and being able to move on, and God comes back at some point and uses it. That's been my experiences in my life.
Anyone else? Have you ever heard someone interpret this differently? Where they say that God wanted this to happen because it's good for somebody.
It's good.
I've heard people say that.
Yeah, that God caused this to happen for some good to come out of it. Is that what Paul is saying? Does Paul say God caused?
No.
All things work together for good. That doesn't mean God causes all things, does it? Some people are so much into God's plan as if our lives are so predestined that there's a blueprint that God has, and it's just a script that's followed. And everything happens to us in our life, some would say happen for a reason. And some people would interpret that reason being God wants us to suffer, be in pain, go through these hardships so that somebody can receive some good out of it. I just don't want to believe that. If it's true, I don't want to believe it. That's one of those I struggle with,
I
yeah.
have a more simplistic understanding of that phrase. It's a phrase that I must have heard, and I still continue to hear from my mother, who's 91, at least once a month. When things are, to me, it's almost like you might be in a difficult situation, but it's strengthening of hope to come.
Absolutely.
Pure and simple, that's how I don't take who's
And now, what did your mother
causing
say?
it.
I'm just
God's
curious.
not.
If you don't mind sharing, what did she say? How did she say it?
She says all things, she just simply says, you know, I mean, I have 2 single daughters, and we have every day is a new drama for the whole family. But my mother just says all things, what does she say? All things work for those who love the Lord, or all things, you know, simple.
I think that's maturity. That is spiritual maturity. And the fact that you hear hope in that is exactly what Paul intends as I read him.
That's
Your
like,
mother's
hang on, this is going to get better.
Your mother's
You'll see.
Your mother's a great theologian.
Yeah, she really is.
I think it's hopeful too. That whatever circumstances that I'm in, I do not have to believe God caused them. To think that God can use these circumstances somehow to bring about some good in His sight. And I think the key there is for His purposes. We're called according to His purpose. If we're living our lives according to the purpose of God, then that means no matter where we are, what happens to us, what our circumstances are, there's something there that God can use for good. It doesn't mean it's good for us. We might find down the road that it is. We look back and say, okay, that turned out to be good. But, you know, that's like an alcoholic who was a drunk for 30 years who's now recovering, saying it was good that I was a drunk because I'm so much better now that I'm recovering. Not really going there. It's good that God, can you come from good, from what was there, but to say that God caused this so that you can be where you are now, I have an issue with. I would have seen it modeled in Jesus. And I cannot find one instance where Jesus caused something bad to happen to anybody and said that's God's will. And when people came to him saying, who's to blame, this person or his parents? Or when the accident happened, the construction accident, who's at fault here? There's got to be a blame to this as to why God did this. And Jesus' response was neither. He refused to put blame on anybody as being the cause of this, as if they justified this sickness or this accident happening to them. He refused to do that. And so I'm taking that as my model. I refuse to do it as well. You know, one of the questions we ask is why, and why do these things happen? That's very common. The Bible, pardon me?
That can be a problem, asking the wrong question.
I don't know whether it can be a problem. I think it's a necessary step oftentimes for people to go through the why is this happening to me, to the I think God can bring good from that, and where do I go from here? Because I think that God's purpose part of that, what's my purpose now that I have these circumstances in my life? What's God's purpose for me, and how can God use me to bring some good from this?
I think Jesus was reinforcing the understanding, should have been the understanding, but it wasn't from 2,000 years or so, that we live in a universe that these things happen automatically in our universe, in our daily existence. disaster after disaster after disaster happened in the life of those people. That's some, but not most of the extreme things. And you just have to understand this is the way the universe is designed, and that Jesus was reinforcing that.
Well, he's certainly saying that there's forces at work in the world that are at play. And that those forces, I mean, when somebody goes crazy and just starts driving down the freeway, pulls off and shoots the person they see to grab their car and shoot somebody else, you know, somebody wants to describe that as God's plan for these people's lives. I'm just, you know, we've got to have a long conversation about that one. But at the same time, God gives us the freedom to act crazy, doesn't he? And the point is, what's our response, you know, for me, what's the responsibility then of the Christian? What would Paul do with these people? I think Paul would try to bring healing into their lives so that they don't have to respond in this kind of outrage, that they don't have to be so isolated, that they can have a support and a community. And that's why the church, I think, is so important, and why the community is so important in their lives. It's almost like all these people that get